Welcome to episode 26 of the Serial Chillers podcast. I am your host, Jesse. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Today, we have returning guest Casey, or as we love to call him, Biggfoot, and first time on the show and listener to the show, Robbie, good friend of mine, and happy to have him. It was a lot of fun recording this one, and as always, producer Greg sat in from across the internet. Today, Biggfoot returned with another story of a dead lady collector, Carl Tanzler, and I bring us the heavy hitter story of Richard Ramirez. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 26 of the Serial Chillers podcast. Metal. All right, we'll just have you chilling for most of this one since you might be lagging behind. All right.
Well, that's not any different than any other episode, though. That's just
true.
Shouting in non sequiturs 5 minutes after the fact.
It's like a good old-fashioned episode of the Serial Chillers podcast with Greg. All right. Well, welcome to episode 26 of 1 million of the Serial Chillers podcast. I have with me, as always, across the internet, producer Greg. Good evening, producer Greg.
Hello.
Yes. Greg's having a little internet trouble, but he's here with us for now, and we're hoping he sticks around. Or doesn't. It's fine. Either way.
Damn rural internet.
You can take the rest of the night off if you need, bro. Across from me, I have returning for his third episode, Biggfoot in the house.
3 in the pink, 1 in the stink.
Okay. So stupid. And to my left here, I have, for the first time ever, but a listener, which is kind of cool, Robbie. Hello, Robbie.
What up?
Welcome for the first time ever. All right, guys, episode 26.
Good that he could be that he's a listener. That means you listening to this right now could be here doing this.
Be here.
My dream is coming true.
Yes.
Right now.
You see that? This is Robbie's Disneyland, God damn it, and we're going to give him the best day possible.
And I'm drinking a beer.
Oh, my God. We are in it to win it tonight. You guys, besides Casey's Biggfoot Designs, Biggfoot Designs, is there anything you'd like to share tonight? Social media? Anything you want to throw out there?
Shout out to my wife. Love ya.
There you go. Boom. Robbie shares the wife love. Casey shares the business and mentions nothing of his significant other.
Ooh. She doesn't like serial killers like I do.
Perfect. You need a balance in the world, so I think that works out just fine. Well, you guys know about the show, but I'll tell you anyway. Each week I sit down with old friends, new friends, good friends, and bad friends to tell them a story of an infamous serial killer. Throughout the show, you guys will chime in on my story and have stories of your own that are true crime, dark, creepy, unsolved, or otherwise mysterious. Lastly, if you have questions about questions, make sure to ask questions because I cannot answer questions if you never asked questions. Any questions? And then welcome to and let's play the Serial Chillers podcast. All right. Today, you guys, I don't know if you knew or if you didn't, you came for a heavy hitter.
Ooh.
Sick.
This is my second heavy hitter episod.
Which was the first one? Remind me.
Dahmer.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, you have been here for two heavy hitters today. I feel like everybody knows this killer. You're not going to be like, wait, who? And now that I'm thinking of it, I feel like Casey might really like this killer. So, today's killer...
Is there a killer he doesn't like?
The Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez.
Hey, Richie.
Hey, Richie. So...
Not my Richie.
So, as always, question number 1, gentlemen. In what year is Richard Ramirez born? The closest to the answer is going to get 250 points and kick off the scoring for today's episode. Trying to remember when Richie was born. I'm looking back at my brain to remember.
Do we write it real big on these?
No, it doesn't matter. You can do that if you want. It doesn't matter as long as you can get your answer to me. All right, Casey, let's see what you got. All right, Casey's got 1951. Robbie guessed 1953, and Robbie's going to get points because in February of 1960, the 28th to be exact, Richard Ramirez is born in El Paso, Texas. So, Robbie, your first question on your first episode, you strike gold.
That's it for me, guys. I'm out.
Robbie is gone. He's leaving on top. That is a champion if I've ever seen one. So, again, February 28th, 1960, Richard Ramirez is born in El Paso, Texas. He's the youngest of Julian and Mercedes Ramirez's 5 children. From a young age, they call him Richie. Not my Richie. He was said to be a very good baby. He didn't cry much. He ate and slept well. Fathers and mothers will know that's a great thing. Good job, Richie.
Yeah.
In 1962, at 2 years old, he was climbing up a dresser when it fell on his head. He was knocked unconscious for 15 full minutes and received 30 stitches for the injury. So I think it goes without saying at this point, if you're listening to the show and we're 26 episodes deep, a head injury at a young age is...
and the pattern begins.
Right, exactly. It's not like it means you're going to be a serial killer, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to be a serial killer.
It's a pretty good chance after that.
Right. So it does happen. 15 minutes, 30 stitches. A few years later, in 1965, he is hit in the head with a wooden swing and again knocked unconscious for several minutes. And the next year, 1966, he himself is being beat fairly often by his father. He's very physically abusive, but for the first time he witnesses his father beating his oldest brother, which is said to affect Richard far more than it ever affected him being beat himself. I believe his oldest brother was 10 years older than him. So at 6, he would have been seeing his 16-year-old brother get his ass kicked by their dad. So
he was like, there's no hope for me if he's getting his ass
yeah,
kicked.
maybe he was, looking to the future. I think kids at a young age like that aren't even really capable, at 6 of thinking about what 16 is like. I just can't imagine seeing somebody that like you look up to, like a 16-year-old brother, and he's probably just getting manhandled as a fully grown man, a father of a son. Is probably pretty scary for Richie.
Probably feeling helpless too.
Yeah, it's I don't think that he had a lot of control. He was a good kid, but I don't know that he came from a good family. So the same year in 1966, he also starts having seizures, and he is diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. So this could have a lot to do with head injuries. This could have, nothing to do with head injuries. We don't know, but it does line up nicely too.
We're 2 for 2 so
yeah,
far.
some
If
pretty
only they had
significant head
medicinal
injuries.
marijuana back then.
Oh man,
there
if
would have been
only.
a few less dead people.
Only a few though.
Yeah, not that many.
Just a few. So in 1967, a year after his diagnosis of epilepsy, he starts to have problems in school, but overall he's a very good student. His older brothers have low learning disabilities and are placed into slower courses to help them get through school. The teacher that they moved, there was a more small classes, instead of the teacher having 30 students, the teacher had 8 students, and they got more one-on-one training, and that teacher ends up molesting them. So the teacher would come over because he was a very trusted member of the community. He would come over when the parents weren't there and give them private lessons and help them. I'm going to help your sons with a learning disability get through school at a quicker age.
Titillating.
It must have been, because Richard denies forever that he was ever molested by the teacher. But there was what's his name here? Professor Louis Schlesinger said there was a very, very small chance that his older brothers were being molested in a home that he was also occupying and being in the same room, and that he was not molested. So there is no affirmative proof. Richard has always denied it, but from Louis Schlesinger's standpoint is that he was probably most likely molested. Also, Louis has the best mustache of all time. Yeah, I saw it on the documentary. I was watching for this, so we'll post a picture up of Louis. Don't worry, his mustache, legendary.
Rivals Raleigh fingers.
It's very Raleigh fingers in and of itself, so that maybe that's exactly why I'm feeling it.
I like that.
So yeah, the teacher's coming over. He's helping out. He's not helping out.
He's helping himself out.
Yeah, the teacher is eventually caught, but I don't think it was 1967. I don't think it was like it is today. He probably moved 2 towns over and got another teaching job, In 1969, Richard is now 9 years old, and he starts to kind of separate from all the other kids. He's becoming quite a loner. He likes to be by himself a lot. He's not attempting to make friends anymore. He's already dropped out of school, or mentally he's dropped out. He's still going, but he's just not focusing anymore. So in 1970, at 10, Richard begins to do drugs. Where does he start? This one is for 250 points. It's 4 multiple choice options. Is Richard's first drug meth? Does he take some pills? Does he smoke some pot? Or does he snort some cocaine? A, B, C, D. Meth, pills, pot, cocaine. Does Richard go for the gateway, or does he reach for the stars right away? Let's see your answers. Casey's got C, pot. Pills, says Robbie. Casey's going to get back in the game because Richard Ramirez did indeed start his drug career with pot. He began to smoke marijuana at the age of 10. Lordy.
My hypothesis about medicinal marijuana leading to fewer deaths was wrong.
Should have used the clues.
I wish I had realized that this was coming up during that, so I could have saved you. Oh, man. Okay, so we've got 250 to 250 after 2 questions. We got 12 total tonight, guys, so I'll let you know where you're at as we roll. So he does begin to smoke marijuana at the age of 10. He would often wait until his parents fell asleep and would leave the house to go sleep in a cemetery to escape his father's rage. So at night, he would just kind of dip when his dad passed out because he knew that if his dad woke up in the middle of the night looking to want to beat some goddamn ass, Richard's right down the hall, so he might as well not be sleeping there. So at 12 years old, this guy, at 10, he's waiting till his parents fall asleep, get a little high, and heading down to the cemetery and just crashing out for that.
I'm hoping that the cemetery is like next door. Not like,
he like goes out of his way to go to the cemetery. Who knows? Well, think about it though. A cemetery is probably a pretty good spot if you don't really want to get found at night. Like not a whole lot of just passerbys heading through a cemetery. Maybe, if it's one without like a 24-hour, on premises keeper, it's probably a good spot to sleep.
Those marble headstones are cooling in that heat,
Yes, indeed. That
Body
El Paso
heat.
heat.
Lay on top of them.
So in 1972, at the age of 12, he starts hanging out with his cousin Mike, who had returned from the Vietnam War. Mike was, of course, a Vietnam War veteran who was said to be quite a soldier, and some of his platoon mates even called him a hero. Mike tells Richard about all of his Vietnam tales, from war to, extracurricular activities. He tells him tactics of jungle war and how mercilessly they killed. He would also tell Richard how he would take women into the jungle and tie them to trees and rape them and kill them. So this is 12-year-old Richard hanging out with this uncle he looks up to, who's a war hero for all intents and purposes in Richard's life. And this guy's telling him, like, yeah, take him out to the jungle and tie him to a tree and just rape him and take care of him. Not only did he tell him the stories, he informed Richard that he had photographed these acts, and he did indeed have photographs for Richard to take a look at.
Ooh.
Richard did take a look at these photographs. He said the first one he saw was of a woman performing oral sex on his cousin, and the next one was of his cousin holding that woman's severed head.
It's like Faces of Death.
That escalated quickly.
Yes. So
isn't this like was it BTK that was doing weird things in Vietnam?
I don't believe so.
All right, never mind.
I just did a BTK episode. I should be able to give you a definitive answer on this. I'm just so balls deep in serial killer trivia that I just I don't know. Maybe
Spoiler alert: Jesse becomes a serial killer.
That's what happens. It all culminates in my serial killing. Greg takes over, and the show becomes a success finally. So Richard sees the pictures. He's kind of deep into how graphic it is, and he realizes that he's sexually aroused by the photographs. So,
which photograph?
Right? Yeah, I guess so. It's something new to him. He never realized he was into gaining control. I think that's what it is for him initially. In 1972, later that year, he's 12. He's starting to act out a little bit, hanging out with cousin Mark. He throws a rock through his neighbor's window, but the discipline doesn't come down because when the neighbor comes over, clearly have seen Richard throw the rock through the window, confronts the mother of Richard, and she just says, like, what do you want me to do? Shrug of the shoulders, like, well, okay, go fix your window, I guess. Like, fuck you, get away. So Richard isn't being disciplined at home. He's kind of getting away with everything. And to couple all of that, at 13, Richard is 5'10" and 190 pounds.
Good God.
So that's pretty hulking. That's man size. That's full grown man size. 5'10", 190 at 13. So there you go. That's
essentially
basically Bigfoot sitting across the table is Richard Ramirez. Put the pentagram on your hand, and you might be a dead ringer. So on June 4th of 1974, he's hanging out with his cousin Mike again, and for whatever reason on this day, Mike had had enough with his wife. Richard was sitting at the kitchen table, and question number 3 What did cousin Mike do to his wife in front of Richard? This one is for 250. It is multiple choice only, so get ready on your pages. Is it A, raped her in front of Richard? B, mercilessly beat her in front of Richard? C, shot her in the back of the head in front of Richard? Or D, stabbed her in front of Richard? All right, got your answers. Robbie has got shot her. Casey has got beat that ass. I'm going to give you this blue pen. I can't see that red one. So on that day, Mike walked into the kitchen where Richard was sitting at the table and his wife was sitting doing dishes at the sink. Mike walked into the kitchen, reached into the refrigerator where he kept his loaded revolver. Apparently, he liked to keep it cold. He put the gun to the back of his wife's head and pulled the trigger. She was instantly dead. So at this time and date, on of May of 1973, at 13 years old, Richard Ramirez witnesses his cousin Mike blow the brains out of his girlfriend face to face. He's right there and got to see it firsthand. So police came and takes Mike away, returned to Richie home, and Richard told his parents he was at the other side of the house when it happened. So, he did tell his parents that he saw the body, but that he hadn't seen the act take place when really he had.
Yeah.
And he thinks he kind of liked it.
Well.
So, Richard Ramirez is at an early age taking it to some pretty intense levels. So Robbie gets 250 points on that one.
You bastard.
You bastard. He's going to take a 500 to 250 lead 1/4 of the way through the questions. We're pretty front loaded on questions. I won't lie to you guys, 'cause I hate bringing up questions when we're talking about murder sprees. So I think we have 7 before we ever get to the first murder. Just to let you know. Okay. So at 13 later that year, Richard fully checks out in school. He goes to Los Angeles for the first time to visit his brother Ruben from El Paso, during which time he started to get into pornography and learned from his brother how to pick locks, open windows from the outside, and disarm alarm systems. I'm not sure why Ruben had all this knowledge as well. We might want to look into him for some shit. But he teaches 13-year-old Richard all about these things because what more important things could you teach a 13-year-old than to pick locks, disarm alarms, and open windows from the outside? Also, hey, check out this porn.
Yeah.
Like
He's being a good big brother.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
In quotes, I guess.
Yeah.
let's be real though. We grew up with the internet, so it was kind of the same thing. You had
The internet was our big
You had
brother.
the anarchist cookbook. You had porn. You had whatever you wanted.
We did have the anarchist cookbook. I made that napalm so much.
It was the best.
Styrofoam and gasoline. All right. So, don't make that. So in July of 73, Richard moves in with his sister Ruth and her husband Roberto Avala. And from 73 to 77, not a ton goes on. I kind of took some funny quotes here. I liked this one. It said, he's not a gang member, but ran with a group that smoked a lot of weed. Richard was said to have dressed in all black and listened to AC/DC constantly on his Walkman. With this group, he began stealing and entering homes through unlocked windows. He began to stalk and hunt rabbits, coyotes, and birds in his free time. I think he was actually, I think he needed to eat. I don't know, though. He would often gut the animals and feed the entrails to his dog. He began to experiment with hallucinogens, metal, mushrooms, and peyote.
Hella metal.
Hella metal. Peyotes. And dang, I don't think so. He was known as Ricky the Klepto, Didos, or Fingers. So he had some pretty endearing nicknames, let's say.
You called it Fingers, the ladies?
Ooh, I don't know that there were a lot
And
of
the guys.
ladies.
And the guys.
If there's one thing that is pretty well known fact about Richard is he just had the worst teeth. He ate candy and drank soda and did not brush his teeth, and that's it. It was like halitosis and brown teeth. Richard Ramirez had a gross ass mouth. Don't worry, you're good. So Ricky the Klepto, Didos, Fingers. At this time, also somewhere near 75, he begins to have sex with prostitutes. Later in his teens, he is sent to the Texas youth camp for juvenile delinquents after just a run of things being in trouble for, mostly petty theft. After returning from the camp, he constantly cut class and his grades fell. Richard drops out of school in the 9th grade, so he's officially dropped out. How old is he at this point? Is he 15, 16, 17, or 18? Did he drop out on his first go of 9th grade?
Yeah.
Or was it his
Trying to
fourth go?
trick us.
How old is he?
Options one more time, please.
15 through 18. 15, 16, 17, or 18 when he dropped out of school his freshman year of high school. It's for 250 points. Got yours, Robbie?
Mm-hmm.
Robbie's got 15. Casey says 17 years old. Well, in 1977, at 17 years old, Richard Ramirez, in his freshman year of high school, drops out. We got a good one going here, you guys. You guys are alternating 250s here. So we've got 500 v 500 with 4 questions through. We're a third of the way. We've got a tie here. We got a good one going. 1977 was also a wonderful experience for Richard because he also had his first sexual experience with a woman who was not a prostitute.
Congrats.
So Richard Ramirez up in this. That lucky lady's name was Nancy Avila. She apparently was quite enamored with young Ricky. In late 1977, Cousin Mike was released from the Texas State Mental Hospital, so Richard started hanging out with him again. Apparently no other real gnarly stuff came from that. I should have mentioned that when Cousin Mike was taken away, he was deemed to be absolutely insane and put in a Texas State Mental Hospital. He gets out here in 77. That is only 4 years later. So, you know, Richard's been around some shit. In 1978, in February, Richard finally just goes ahead and moves out to Los Angeles where the rest of his family is gone. He, at this point, becomes a habitual drug user and candy eater. He used to drive around and have nothing but candy and Coca-Cola in the car. This resulted in advanced tooth decay and halitosis. What a delicious smelling gentleman he must have been.
See, kids, it's not just meth that messes up your teeth. Stop eating all that Halloween candy.
You fuckers. So,
That's rude.
in 1978, he also has another huge thing. He finds religion at 18. What religious figure does he begin to worship? This one's for 500 points, and there are no multiple choice options.
Ooh.
At 18 years old, Richard Ramirez finds religion. What religious figure does he begin to worship? I'm going to give it to Casey. He's going to get 500 with Baphomet. He did become a Satanist. This was Richard. Thank Pentagram.
Yeah. I would
Down
have known
with
that anyways,
Jesus,
yeah.
up with Satan.
Yeah, metal! Well, I you guys know I love to throw out Hail Satan. I think it's a funny thing to say. Richard Ramirez definitely hyped the satanic panic to the nth degree with this. It was already a really big thing in the early and middle 80s that, you know, satanic cults are murdering and they're killing, and then Richard Ramirez takes this shit to an all new level because he was, you know, I kind of get pretty detailed on some of these. He's making people like, swear to Satan, you've told me where all the jewels are. Like, yeah. And I'm not sure. Like, part of it feels like he really did believe he was being protected by Satan. And part of it feels like he was almost doing it like me. Like, fucking poke at people with this, but like, yeah,
Troll everyone.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure where he fell. Greg, what do you think? Richard Ramirez, troll or true Satanist?
A troll of the highest fashion.
Greg says troll of the highest fashion. All right. So he begins to worship Satan. In fact, at the age of 19 in 1978, he drives to San Francisco to meet Anton LaVey, the author of the Satanic Bible. So in 1978, from the ages of 18 to 24, he's arrested many times for possession, breaking and entering, theft, and auto theft. In 1979, he began to let his personal hygiene go completely. He was said to be a very repulsive person to be around with his teeth and personal hygiene. He said that he showered once a month. That was his deal. Monthly, he had to get one in. Dude, I
gotta get that one in though.
Yeah.
Gotta get that one in.
I feel so gross if I skip a day. I can feel the film building.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think he would scratch his arm and he could just peel up that skin? You know what I mean? Like
I don't think
under
that.
his fingernails.
Only because I have literally never even I'm blocking it now. I don't want to think that. So he was said to be very disgusting. In 1981, he's now 21 years old. He's arrested in Pasadena again, motherfucker, for auto theft. He spends an insignificant amount of time in jail for this crime. In 1983, he is now 23 years old. His sister Ruth went to L.A. to try to convince Richard to move back to El Paso. He refused and admitted to being a thief and that Satan was protecting him. Instead of trying to help her brother, she just left it at that. All right,
Smart lady.
Satan, you got it, buddy.
Yep.
Like, you know what? I'm going to head back to Texas if you need anything. I'll be up there. In 1984, at the age of 24, Richard is going to commit his last crime before he begins to murder. What is the crime? I have 4 options for you guys. This one's going to be for 250 points. Is it A, rape, B, another auto theft, C, purse snatching, or D, burglary? Rape, auto theft, purse snatching, or burglary? All right, Casey says auto theft. Robbie says burglary. Casey, really quickly before we go, got 500 points on that last question. And he's also going to get 250 on this one. It was indeed his last auto theft. So 250 more to Casey there. Robbie, it is 500 to 1,250. Bigfoot in the lead on this one. In 1984, at the age of 24, he was arrested in Los Angeles for auto theft. So Satan isn't completely protecting him, just making sure he doesn't do any serious time as of now. So right now, we will take our first break.
Come back or I'll kill you.
Hey guys, I'm super excited to announce episode 28. Casey and Sam from True Crime Storytime will be joining me and playing the Serial Chillers podcast. Don't miss this one. All right, guys, welcome back to episode 26 of the Serial Chillers podcast. I am still here with Robbie and Bigfoot in studio, and of course, producer Greg across the internet. Casey has brought us a story today, so kind of nice because it's been a while, I think, since somebody brought a story. So I looked a little bit into it when you told me about it, and I see a little bit of a theme going with your stories, I think.
Say.
So take it away, dude. I'll say no more.
All right, so we're going to talk about Carl Tanzler, a.k.a. Count Carl
I like that.
Cosell.
Ooh.
All right, so Tanzler went by many names. His name listed as George Carl Tanzler on his German marriage certificate. According to his U.S. citizenship papers, he was Carl Tanzler von Cosell. He signed some of his medical records as Count Carl Tanzler von Cosell, and his death certificate just simply states Carl Tanzler.
Maybe he's just confused.
I don't know, but they don't, from what I've researched, they didn't find like a birth certificate with his actual birth name on it, so it's still up in the air.
It's whichever one you want.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
So for the sake of the podcast, I'm just going to say Tanzler.
All right, fair enough.
So, Tanzler was born on February 8th, 1877 in Dresden, Germany.
Dang, my birthday's the 7th of February.
It's close.
Well, as a child,
Spirit animal.
Tanzler reported visions given to him by an ancestral relative of a, quote, exotic beauty, whom he believed was going to be his one true love. He also later claimed that while he was older, traveling in Genoa, Italy, he had the same visions.
Wait, it was a relative, though?
It was an ancestral relative.
Okay.
So I'm going to
But it was still a relative, though, right?
Yeah, well, based off of what I read, he thought that it was the ghost of one of his deceased aunts.
Okay.
So,
All right.
So in 1920, Tanzler married Doris Anna Schaefer, and together they had 2 daughters, Aisha Tanzler and Crystal Tanzler. Tanzler
Aisha feels like a progressive name.
Yeah.
I know, that's what I thought too, and I realized Aisha is a Muslim name, and he actually spent a few years in India, and so I think that's probably where the connection came from.
Wow, look
It's
at
a
that.
Muslim name.
Yeah. So as a child, Tanzler reported... Oh, I already read that part. Okay. In 1920, Tanzler married Doris Anna Schaefer. They had the two daughters, Aisha and Crystal. I believe it was Crystal died of tuberculosis only after a few years. So Aisha lived until 1998. So if you want to look her up, you can.
Oh, shit.
Tanzler immigrated to the U.S. in 1926 and eventually settled in Zephyr Hills, Florida, where his sister was now residing. And later on, so he left his wife and kids, and then later on they came.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, later on
They linked back up.
Yeah.
I'm ready for you guys now.
So yeah, they came over. That was in 1926. So in the same year, later in the same year, they came over, and then in 1927 he left. In 1927,
He's over it again.
Tanzler left his family and took a job as an X-ray tech at the U.S. Marine Hospital in Key West, Florida, under the name Carl von Cosell.
Yes.
It was 1930, and Tanzler was in his 50s when he set eyes on a patient, Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos. Elena was sick with tuberculosis, and her mother brought her to the hospital to seek treatment. Tanzler immediately recognized her as the beautiful exotic woman that had been revealed to him in his visions years earlier.
Whoa.
So
it wasn't his ghost aunt. It was
Yeah.
like a premonition.
yeah, you could see into the future. Nostradamus. Dang. Von Cosell.
Count.
So despite his lack of medical training, he was just an X-ray technician. He took it upon himself to see to Elena's well-being.
He's going to help her beat TB with
yeah.
X-rays.
In 1930.
Sounds
it wasn't.
promising.
It wasn't X-rays. What he did was he had a conglomerate of some homemade remedies. I'll steal a little medicine from the hospital over here. Like, we'll figure this out. But he did bring X-ray equipment to her home, and
It didn't work.
Yeah, obviously it didn't work. So, Elena eventually succumbed to her illness and died on October 25th, 1931. Tanzler paid for the funeral and built a mausoleum for Elena in the Key West Cemetery with all of her family's approval. He spent almost every night visiting her tomb for the next 1.5 years. He reported that her spirit would sing to him in Spanish as he sat by her tomb, and that her spirit would often tell him to take her from her grave. So some records that I read said that
Come in here and get me.
every single night when he would go to the mausoleum to visit her, he would ask for her hand in marriage. And one night,
She said yes.
she said yes.
Coming this fall.
So, what did Tanzler do? He attached the corpse's bones together with piano wire, and he placed the corpse in a radio flyer. I don't know if it was a radio flyer, but it was a toy wagon. Placed the corpse in the toy wagon, brought it on home.
Well, we know for sure that it was a radio flyer. They've got the corner on toy wagon, so
That is real. So after he got the corpse home and he had assembled everything with the piano wire and coat hangers, he put glass eyes into the sockets and replaced the decomposing skin with wax and plaster. As the hair fell out of the corpse, Tanzler made a wig out of Elena's actual hair that was collected by her mother before she had passed away.
oh man. So she was like balding as she died with TB or consumption.
Right.
And her
collected
mother was
the
just
hair.
like, I'm gonna keep her hair, and he was like,
Yeah.
I'm getting that hair.
Yeah.
I got better uses for it than you.
I'm not going to let you know that I have her body,
Yeah.
but I need that hair to make a wig.
Yeah, I wonder what he
Trust.
told her to get that hair.
I don't. I might just go steal that at that point,
Well,
right?
yeah.
In all accounts, though, the mother willingly handed it over to him. I mean, he did pay for the funeral. He paid for a mausoleum to be
So the
built,
least
you
she
know?
could do is give him the hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, and that's gonna be weird. I'm gonna sniff that hair. I'm gonna need you to give it to me though.
All right. So as so it wasn't long after the burial in 1931. So that's already about a year after she's died. That's when the mother finally handed over the hair. Tanzler stuffed Elena's corpse with rags to keep the original form. So the abdominal cavity in the stomach, stuffed it with rags, just like imagine a piñata. You can go online and see pictures of it too.
So at this
Just
point, there's
FYI.
the only thing that's really left is her bones, because he's replaced her skin with wax and
Right.
she's
I
stuffed
would
with rags.
assume some of the skin was still
Okay, he's just
intact.
replacing it as it gets
As it
non-usable.
goes, yeah.
Right.
Gross.
Um,
We're having this conversation right now.
What was her name?
oh man, Elena. Her name is super long. I'm gonna
Just
have to
type
go-
in Carl Tanzler victim. I bet you
Yeah.
get it.
So he stuffed it with rags, and he dressed her up in stockings, jewelry. He put gloves on her decaying hands, and kept the body in his bed. I mean,
Might as well make it beautiful. Oh man, yeah. So we're looking at a picture now. We'll get it on Instagram for
Yeah.
you guys. It's it's pretty scary.
That's all there is to say. Yeah.
it looks like a piñata to me. I don't know.
Greg typed out the whole name for us here. Let's see. We got Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos.
So, since you're sleeping in a bed with a decaying body, you
Right.
just get rid of that with copious amounts of perfume and disinfectants.
There's the whole
And-
thing.
And preserving agents. Just to mask the odor,
I imagine that the preserving agents overpower everything else that you just said.
That's true.
And it just smells like
That's true.
formaldehyde
Yeah.
in that house.
It smells like a disgusting college science classroom. So, Tanzler lived with the body for 9 years.
For 9
He's-
years.
9 years he lived with the body. He slept with the body in his bed, danced with it, and perhaps practiced necrophilia. As it was found, he also placed a vaginal tube
You know he did that.
in the cadaver.
For sure.
Why else would you have it?
Other accounts do say that he admitted to consummating his marriage. So
So he for sure did.
yeah.
For sure.
So rumors spread on the island as curious children would often see Tanzler playing with a quote-unquote life-size doll inside of his house.
Oh man, he wasn't shy about it. Like,
No,
this was like a
no.
blinds open,
So
check
from-
me out kind of deal.
From what I read, people on the island, on Key West at the time, there was about 2,300 people on the island. And they kind of just chalked it up to this crazy, he's a crazy doctor.
Who had a life-size doll?
Yeah, he's like a crazy. Well, they knew that he loved this lady that had passed away, so like, oh, he's a crazy romantic. He made like a
A
fake
doll
doll
of
of her, and he's just gonna live with her forever.
Now we call it psychopathy.
So in October of 1940, Elena's sister, Florinda, heard rumors of Tanzler sleeping with the body, and confronted Tanzler at his home, where she discovered her sister's preserved corpse in his possession.
Oh, so she rolled up on it? Like the one who
Yeah.
discovers it is Florinda?
Yeah, and from a few stories that I had listened to, what happened was she confronted him by saying, "Oh, I wish I could just go and see my sister one more time." And he was kind of like, "Well, since you said that."
Surprise.
And at this point, he's lived with her for like nearly a decade. So it's
Yeah.
it's become so normal to him. He probably wants to share it with somebody so badly.
So this was 9 years later. Florinda notified authorities, and Tanzler was arrested and detained on wantonly and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization.
It's going to be like a 5-year sentence or whatever.
After a preliminary hearing
Slap on the
on
wrist.
October 9th, 1940, at the Monroe County Courthouse in Key West, Tanzler was held to answer on the charge. Question number 1. How many years did Tanzler serve? Is it A, 1, B, 2, C, 3, or D, none of the above?
I'm going none.
I'm going to go none too
Yeah.
because I think I think they give him like this is a probationary charge.
You're
Greg
both
says D.
winners. You're both winners.
Give me the points.
None of the above. The charges were eventually dropped and he was released as the statute of limitations for the crime has expired. The statute of limitations at the time was 7 years, and this was 10 years later when they tried it.
Oh my.
So during his arrest, he was given a psychiatric evaluation, and he was found mentally competent to stand trial, despite the fact that he claimed he planned to use an airship to fly his encased wife, quote, high into the stratosphere so that radiation from outer space could penetrate Elena's tissue and restore life to her somnolent form.
Hey, Greg, you're the official conspiracy voice of the Serial Chillers podcast. Have you ever heard of somebody flying into the stratosphere to return to life with radiation? I know that's not maybe necessarily a conspiracy, but it seems like something you may have come across at some point in your
research.
It's mostly just a transferring of energy. No, I have never heard anybody doing it that way. You might want to check with North Korea. They sent a guy to the sun. He walked on the surface of the sun. He was back 45 minutes later. So they might have some sort of technology to do something like that.
That's what we have to do.
He died on the way to the sun and then came back as he was, leaving the radiation. I don't know. Maybe we should start there.
We'll check it out. Thank you.
I'm not saying it was aliens.
But you're not.
But it was aliens. So shortly after the corpse's discovery by authorities, Elena's body was examined by physicians and pathologists and put on display at the Dean Lopez Funeral Home, where it was viewed by as many as 6,800 people. So the island itself was about 2,300 people at the time. That means
people came.
Yeah. People were like, yo, I'm about to see that dead lady.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm getting that for show.
Stand by me. You guys want to see a dead body?
Elena's body was eventually returned to the Key West Cemetery, where the remains were supposed to be dismembered and buried in 3 unmarked graves so that Tanzler could never find Elena's corpse again.
Oh, my gosh. They had to hide it from him?
Yeah. Like, this guy's a little bit crazy. So,
weird.
Yeah. So in 1944, Tanzler moved to Pasco County, Florida, close to Zephyr Hills, Florida, where he wrote an autobiography that appeared in the pulp publication Fantastic Adventures in 1947. His home was near his wife, Doris, his actual wife, who apparently supported Tanzler in his later years. Separated from Elena's corpse, Tanzler used a death mask to create a life-sized effigy of Elena, and lived with it until his death on July 3rd, 1952. His body was discovered on the floor of his home 3 weeks after his death in the arms of the effigy.
For all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. He should have just done that from the start.
Yeah.
Well, there's a rumor. This has never been confirmed nor denied. There is a rumor that the person that was supposed to dismember the body and put it into 3 different graves couldn't bring themselves to do that, to like dismember it and separate it from itself. And some people say that Tanzler bribed that person into the actual remains, and he actually did die with the real remains.
Huh. Oh, Tanzler.
You
hopeless
romantic.
Yeah. So, but he is published in 2 places. So if you want to read up on him, you can. Like I said,
you can read Carl Tanzler's work. Is it about?
Yeah.
Is it about this?
But one of them is in the September 1947 edition of Fantastic Adventures. There's a cover for it. You can look it up. It's pretty cool, and I think it's about the ghost of Elena, is what it's called, and it's written by himself. And he was also kept as a prisoner of war during World War I because he was a German, but he was living in Australia at the time, so the British captured him. He wrote an account of that in the Rosicrucian Digest. So he was a Rosicrucianist, and he did publish it in their magazine, the March/April edition of 1939.
All right, so if somebody can find those, send them our way.
If you're down to read, about necrophilia.
All right, the Carl Tanzler way. Well,
so I have something that I like about human dolls.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Casey. Yes, Casey comes in strong again with a human dead doll story. So, Carl Tanzler.
I should add.
Yes.
Sorry, Ripley's Believe It or Not had it on display at 1.2. I forgot to say that.
That seems the effigy or the.
The effigy.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll take the effigy.
We'll see if it was the effigy.
Yeah,
It
right.
might
Oh,
have
that's
been the
right. She was
actual
dismembered and okay, yeah. All right. Well, I was gonna say let's get back to some fucked up stuff, but it's only like a little bit more fucked up than that. So, we're gonna jump into some pretty heinous shit right now. So before we start,
If it's not heinous, it's anus.
before we start, question number 7. When it's all said and done, how many people will be dead at the hand of the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez? The closest to this gets 250 points.
Just do it!
Robbie says 16. Casey's got 7. The answer is 14. There's going to be 14. Robbie's going to get back on the board, start heading back, and chipping away. Chipping away. Okay, so we've got 750 to 1250. You're way in it. And you've got 6 questions to go. Anybody's game at this point. April of 1984, on April 10th, 1984, 9-year-old Mei Lung was found murdered in a hotel basement where Ramirez was living in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. The girl had been raped, beaten, and stabbed to death, and her body was found hanging from a pipe. This, his first known killing, was not initially identified as being connected to the crime spree. This wasn't discovered until 2009 when Ramirez's DNA was matched to DNA obtained at the crime scene. In 2016, officials disclosed evidence of a second suspect identified through DNA sample retrieved from the crime scene who is believed to have been present after Luang's murder. Described as being a juvenile at the time, authorities have not publicly identified the suspect and have not brought charges due to the lack of sufficient evidence. So
he was never charged for it.
Richard Ramirez was, but they don't. They think there was a second person though.
Okay.
It could have been somebody, and they admit this, that it could have been somebody that came and found the body and disturbed it and left and never told it.
Right.
But it's kind of crazy to think about. He's gonna get arrested. It's not. I think it's 1985 or maybe early 86. Right. And this is 2009. Some DNA evidence connects him to a murder of a little girl in a hotel that he happened to be living in at the time. So kind of cool that it happened so late. Kind of interesting that it goes down like that. So I get to bring it to you as his first murder, but it's the last one we found out about. Tarantino'd you.
A 9-year-old in the tenderloin? That is a tender loin.
Oh my gosh. Well, good thing we edit this show. In June 28th,
God, edit that out.
1984, at the age of 24, Richard enters through the open window of Jenny Vincow and violently stabs her while she slept and then has sex with the corpse. Not a whole lot of info other than that, but do you need much more? March 17th, 1985, just when we got 6 months later, Richard Ramirez attacks 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her home in Rosemead, shooting her in the face with a .22 caliber gun after she pulled into her garage. She survived when the bullet ricocheted off the keys she held in her hand as she lifted to protect herself. How about that shit? He comes in. He doesn't say anything. He approaches her, gun straight out. He goes, pulls the trigger, and she goes, ah! Hands up with her keys in her hand and ricochets the bullet away.
I was just going to say, how bad would that suck to, die at the hands of a .22?
I think the biggest gun he goes, because he's very inconsistent as far as weapon he chooses. I think he does 22 and 25. Dude. He never chooses a large caliber weapon, but he always goes for headshots. So, Richard Ramirez, yeah. But unfortunately, that situation's not going to end tragic less. She is able to ricochet the bullet with the keys off her hand, and inside the house was her roommate, Dale Okazaki, who was 34 years old. Dale is a female. I should clear up. I know it sounds like a very male name. Dale hears the gunshot. She's in the kitchen. She sees the garage door swing open, and it's not her roommate. She ducks behind the kitchen counter. Richard sees her duck behind the kitchen counter, and I think Richard kind of just stood there for a while, because after about a minute, Dale pokes her head out from behind the counter, and Richard was sitting there waiting with the pistol and shot Dale through the forehead. Dies instantly. So we can see kind of early he's playing games. Like this is it's going to be his camper exactly.
Screen looker.
Screen looking camper.
He just sat back. He knew where she was. He saw her go behind there. She wasn't going to get away tonight. So he shoots her and he kind of just dips out. Within an hour of this situation, he's in the city of Rosemead. Ramirez goes ahead and pulls a home invasion of 30-year-old Cy Lan, or Veronica. Oh, I'm sorry. He pulls her out of, after the home invasion, he pulls her out of her car. She's driving and he starts following her. And she pulls over because he's very clearly following her, kind of like, can I fucking help you? Yeah. And Richard Ramirez is not very understanding of the situation and her pulling over, and shoots her twice with a .22 caliber handgun and flees the scene. She was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. The 2 murders and the 3rd attempted murder in a single day attracted extensive coverage from news media, who dubbed the curly-haired attacker with bulging eyes and wide-spaced, rotting teeth. We all know him as the Night Stalker, but initially he had 2 different nicknames. Which nicknames did Richard receive from the media after these initial attacks? So, was it A, the Stalker and the Quick Strike Killer, B, Walk-in Killer and the Valley Intruder, C, Bad Hygiene Stalker and the Smelly Killer, or D, Halitosis Murderer and Bad Teeth Bandit? Stalker, Quick Strike Killer, Walk-in Killer, Valley Intruder, Bad Hygiene, Smelly, Halitosis, Bad Teeth Bandit. Robbie's going D, Halitosis Murderer and the Bad Teeth Bandit. Casey is giving me an answer of A, Stalker, Quick Strike Killer. It is neither of these. That means I made up some pretty cool serial killer names for Richard Ramirez.
Was it C?
So he is the B, Walk-in Killer, or the Valley Intruder.
Wow.
So
I thought to myself in my head too. I was like, I've heard Valley Intruder before.
But he had said that they were talking about his bad teeth.
I know.
So that's why I went that.
See, that's misleading.
Yeah.
dang, maybe I threw you a little loop there and see if I can. God dang. Thanks, noob. So they call him the Walk-in Killer and the Valley Intruder after these initial attacks. 3 days later, he killed an 8-year-old girl from Eagle Rock. I could not find any more information on that. I did find 3 sources who said that he was connected to a killing of an 8-year-old girl. Almost no details. Some of them we have crazy detail about. Like I think he may have given, because
like an account.
How would you have known that she hid behind for a minute and he stood there? I mean, there would be no way to know that without Richard Ramirez's account. So I'm assuming he was very forthcoming with a lot of them and maybe held back on a few, and this might have been one of those. So on March 27th, 1985, Ramirez entered the home that he had burgled a year earlier in Whittier at approximately 2 a.m. and killed the sleeping Vincent Zazzara, who was 64, with a gunshot to his head from a .22 caliber handgun. Zazzara's wife, Maxine, age 44, was awakened by her husband's murder, and Ramirez beat her and bound her hands while demanding to know where the valuables were. While he ransacked the room, Maxine escaped her bonds and retrieved a shotgun from under the bed. It can be all over right fucking here, dude. She pointed it directly at Richard because he had his back turned to her and pulled the trigger. And what did she get? A very loud, very unforgettable click. The gun was not loaded. An infuriated Ramirez hears the click, understood clearly what it was, turned around, and shoots her 3 times in the chest. Retrieved a kitchen knife from the kitchen and carved her eyes out of her head. Her body was then mutilated with multiple stab wounds in her eye, and the gouged eyes were placed into a jewelry box that Richard Ramirez left with. And the same doctor I was talking about before, Louis Schlesinger, was saying that the eye stealing was essentially a clue towards the fact that whoever was doing this was incredibly paranoid. This is something you really only
because the corpse saw him.
So I think it's something like that. Like it's he doesn't take anybody else's eyes. I think like she saw him alive. She almost got him. And then I think he took it personally. So he's like, I'm taking her eyes. But for them, they found it as a very huge clue as like towards his paranoia, which is very true. Right. Richard Ramirez is a very squirmy, paranoid individual. So he takes the eyes, he puts them in a jewelry box. He leaves. There's multiple stab wounds to the body. Her body is mutilated a lot more than just the eyes being gouged out. This is virtually the only evidence that the police have towards Richard Ramirez is a footprint left from a pair of Avia sneakers, size 11.5, I believe. So what's insane about this, Avia had only been sold in the U.S. for like 3 months at this point. So Avia is very new. They take the footprint and they are literally able to span the amount of Avias sold across LA County, and one pair of this shoe, 11.5, had been sold. And they tracked down the store, and Richard Ramirez had paid in cash, so they had no way of tracking who it was. But we're talking 1985, and in one day they went, boom, where were these shoes sold? Boom, they were sold right here. And the guy was like, yeah, I for sure sold those to this guy. The guy couldn't remember at all who it was, but if Richard Ramirez had happened to have paid with a credit card, again, like the shotgun, could have been over right here. So there's a lot of things that maybe Satan is protecting.
I was going to say
Richard Ramirez a little more than we think. So bullets found at the scene were matched to those found at previous attacks, and the police realized that a serial killer was at large. Vincent and Maxine's bodies were discovered by their son Peter the following morning. On May 14th, 1985, Ramirez returned to Monterey Park in search of another random victim and entered the home of Bill Doy, who is 66 years old, and his disabled wife, Lillian, who is 56. He surprises Doy in his bedroom and shoots him in the face with a .22 semi-automatic pistol as Doy went for his own handgun. After beating the mortally wounded man unconscious, Ramirez entered Lillian's bedroom, bound her with thumb cuffs, and raped her after he ransacked the home for valuables. Bill Doy died of his injuries while in the hospital. His wife was again raped and beaten, and Ramirez made her swear her love to Satan, as well as drawing a giant pentagram on the wall and her inner thigh. The next day, he bound, raped, and sodomized Ruth Wilson, who was 41, while her 12-year-old son was locked in a closet. Afterward, he cut her once and then tried to get her and her son, or tied her and her son together, and then he completely leaves the situation. So he's not fully opposed to leaving somebody alive at a scene. That's kind of something that we see. And then we have another murder in June of 1985. That's another one where there's not a lot of information, but he is connected to it fully, and it's pretty much been proven. It was one of these post his trial, so he's never tried for these, but he was responsible for this, and it's a six-year-old girl in Acadia. On June 29th, 1985, Richard Ramirez drove a stolen Mercedes-Benz to Monrovia and stopped at the house of Mabel, or Ma Bell, who was 83, and her sister Florence Lang, who was 81. He finds a hammer in the kitchen and bludgeoned and bound the invalid Lang in her bedroom. He then bound and bludgeoned Bell before using an electrical cord to electrically shock the women. He takes a knife, he cuts off the tip of the, towards the lamp, has it still plugged into the wall, and he's zapping them. What? He came, and apparently this night he came with nothing.
I was going to say, I think that's interesting about him, though, is that
you found a hammer.
Yeah, he doesn't have the same MO for each killing like a lot of serial killers
Well,
do.
It sounds like he didn't really think it through.
Or Satan is guiding the way.
There's always that.
And telling him that, listen, you do the same MO, they're going to find you. We got to do this differently every time, little buddy. Listen, Richard, I'll get you through this. And all you have to do is damn your eternal soul. So Richard, he is definitely, like you said, generally with serial killers, Greg and I have now been on many episodes together. Just because and because you've listened, and probably others, I'm imagining. Serial killers tend to carry the same MO through, or very similar MOs. Richard is literally switching weapons, he's switching styles, he's switching the people he likes, he's switching. I think he is just whatever he could find.
Yeah.
Like this night, I think he might have just been driving home from having dinner and was like,
Fuck it.
I'm gonna fucking kill someone. Like he didn't have anything with him in the car. He's like, I'll find something there. I can kill somebody with something at their house. I think I got this. So, right. He uses the electrical cord to shock her. He does more pentagrams all throughout the house. The same kind of deal. Inner leg and on the wall in the bedrooms. The women are discovered 2 days later. Both are found alive but comatose. And Belle later died of her injuries, but only Florence Lang made it through.
Oh.
So one of them does. Later this night, he is said to have possibly also slit the throat of a sleeping Patty Higgins. So he might have just gone. This one is kind of one of the up in the air ones. He might have just gone on the way home from this, not got high enough, and broke into a room and slit the throat of a 32-year-old Patty Higgins. But on the same night in which he raped and killed an 83 and an 81-year-old woman. So, yes, he's not exactly, let's call it picky. So, on July 2nd, 1985, he drove a stolen Toyota Arcadia, randomly selecting the house of Mary Louise Cannon, who was 75 years old. It says randomly a lot. Like I feel like I included that because most of the sources include that they were random. Sure seems like he's rolling into a lot of seniors' homes for it being and maybe, and I don't know these areas well enough of California. Right. Maybe these are strictly kind of old folk areas where just old people live, but they're in their 80s and their 70s and their late 60s. There was a 32-year-old that there was no fight. He didn't make her put up a fight. He slit her throat in bed. All these old people he's kind of terrorizing and torturing. And that was another thing. I keep bringing up Louis Schlesinger, but he constantly, every time it went to him, talked about the torment that Richard put his victims through, that sometimes it would last 8 or 12 hours and he would be screaming at them and making them just, give their undying love to Satan. And, and I imagine, and I'm not a very religious person myself, but there are a lot of people that need to, they would like to say their final words of peace, and he's shooting them in their face when they're declaring their undying love to Satan. He's
he was an evangelist.
Yeah, he's one
of sort.
He's one of the biggest monsters ever. We've covered a lot. We've covered people who've killed way more than this, but I don't know that anybody has truly terrorized like he did. I don't like to imagine it, but I imagine it just being a situation where he's got people tied up and he's yelling and he's freaking out himself and he's yelling at them and he's like punching himself in the face and punching them and
it makes me think of Malcolm McDowell's character in Clockwork Orange, because it's the same thing. Like, there's not really an MO. I'm just gonna go crazy, and be ultra violent because I can.
Did you ever see Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer?
I haven't watched it yet.
There is a scene where they film one of their home invasions, and it's like, and it is what I imagine this was like a lot of just in their face, why are you screaming? Why, just a lot of very intense, very like just dark emotion, and that of all the things, like getting shot in the face while you sleep is one thing,
right?
And I don't want to go like that, but if I've got to go, that's one of the top 5 ways I'm going to pick to do it. If I have to be murdered for it, being terrorized for 12 hours and rape, it's just I guess I don't know why I'm slowing down here on this. Let's roll. On July 5th, 85, Richard Ramirez broke into the home of Sierra Madre a home in Sierra Madre. I was like, man, her name's Sierra Madre? Home in Sierra Madre, and bludgeoned 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron as she slept in her bedroom.
Gosh.
After searching in vain for a knife in the kitchen, Ramirez attempted to strangle the girl with a telephone cord. Fact, her mom and dad are home. Didn't hear any of it.
They woke up to it.
No, they didn't. So he attempts to choke her with
the
a telephone cord. He was startled to see sparks emanate from the cord, and when his victim began to breathe, he fled the house, believing that Jesus Christ had intervened and saved her. She survived the savage beating. She got out of bed after it. and like stumbled down the hall, kind of like yelling, and her parents finally then come out. And it says that she received 478 stitches to the scalp, and then they had like the doctor who did the reconstruction of her scalp that said it took 4 yards of stitches.
Ooh. 4
in just her
yards.
head. He never hit her anywhere else. He just bashed her over the head.
I feel like I could cover my entire scalp with 4 yards.
I think that might have been what we're talking here.
Ugh.
Yeah, like
There's
major
a soft
shit.
spot now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, and he went for a knife to try to kill her. It was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it with this cord for whatever reason he thought, or the cord did spark. Whether it did or did not, I'm not sure. But for what I'm thinking that those sparks hit, and he was like, Jesus is in this room right now.
Was that
I've got to get the fuck out of here.
First time trying to strangle somebody to death? Because remember, you talked about how much it actually takes to...
Right. And I think so.
You know?
And he did it with a cord, too. So I don't know. Yeah, I think you might be right. It may have been taking a little more than he thought. Yeah. Maybe these sparks do happen.
I was going to say, I think you're right about him being a troll. Because if you're a true Satanist, isn't Satan...
You got to battle Jesus.
He's more powerful than Jesus, right?
I would guess that's your belief, right?
I don't know.
You can't, hey, tell us, Richard. Oh, wait, you're dead. July 7th, 1985, Richard Ramirez burglarized the home of Joyce Lucille Nelson, who was 61 years old. Again, this is in Monterey Park. He finds her asleep in the living room on her couch, and he beats her to death using, guess what? His fucking fists and his feet. So I think it's just another one where he was like, man, that burger was good. What do I want for dessert? How about rape and murder an old lady? Like, you know what? Yeah, I do want that. So that is what he got. He stomped her to death. That was the way he killed her. But a shoe print from an Avia sneaker was left imprinted on her face. The same Avia sneaker that was patent sole design that had only been in the States for just about 3 or 4 months at this point. So matching to the crime from before.
Stomp her hard to leave that.
Oh, to leave an imprint?
Yes,
Hell yeah.
Yes. On the same day, after cruising 2 other neighborhoods, he returned to Monterey Park and chose the home of Sophie Dickman, who is 63. Ramirez assaulted and handcuffed Dickman at gunpoint, attempted to rape her, and stole her jewelry. When she swore to him that he had taken everything of value, he told her to swear on Satan that you're not lying to me.
All right, I swear on Satan.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Does that mean you're leaving? Or... July 20th, 1985, Ramirez purchased a machete before driving a stolen Toyota to Glendale. He chose the home of Layla Nading, who was 66, and her husband Maxon, who was 68. He burst into the sleeping couple's bedroom and hacked them with a machete, then killed them with shots to the head from the .22 caliber handgun. All right, let's set the scene here, right? Like, we're sleeping. Oh, night, babe. Oh, night. It's midnight or whatever. We go to sleep. It's 2, or we've been out for a couple hours, and all of a sudden someone just bursts through the door. And they don't say anything. They don't stop. They don't look at us. They just burst through the door and immediately just start wailing on you with a machete.
Perfect.
I'm gonna wake up a lot.
What do you like? What can you do? That is so fucking insane to me.
Sometimes the boys will burst into the door at like 2, 3 a.m. because they're scared.
Right.
I'm gonna wake up a lot differently now.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I sleep by a loaded gun.
Yes. Welcome to Earth. So, he hits him with the machete a lot of times when they're no longer mobile. .22 caliber handgun to the head. It's over. He further mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing the house of valuables. After quickly fencing the stolen items from the Needing residence, he drove to Sun Valley. At approximately 4:15 a.m., he broke into the home of the Kovananth family. He murdered Chinarong Konavanth by shooting the sleeping man in the head with a .25 caliber handgun, killing him instantly. He then repeatedly raped Somkeed Konavanth, beating and sodomizing her. He bound the couple's terrified 8-year-old son before dragging Somkeed around the house to reveal the location of any valuable items which he stole. During his assault, he demanded that she swear to Satan that she was not hiding any more from him. Like, come on, fucking say it.
Could you imagine a toothless man with like this mangled mane looking at you like in the...
I think the worst part is that almost all his teeth were there. They were just so fucked. They were just little nubs
Looked
chilling
like his
in there.
tongue was in jail.
Yeah. That's almost
Man.
exactly. And the bars were just made of chocolate.
I can't imagine like that's the last thing you see before you die.
Or smell.
Oh.
I like have a morning cup of coffee, and I don't want to talk to anybody till I like had a few pieces of gum and like, you know, like this motherfucker ate Coca-Cola, drank candy, and like did super drugs. It was like, nah, I shower once a month. I got it, guys. So, you know what? I've got a little clip for you. Let's just break it up here with a tiny clip of Richard Ramirez. This is after his arrest. They asked him, I think the question is on there. Let's see here.
Admit to being evil, Richard?
We are all evil in some form or another, are we not?
So yeah. Richard thinks we are all evil, you guys, in some form.
I did watch that interview
or another. He loved it.
Yeah.
He loved being interviewed. He was such a fucking attention whore. So I don't know. Thought that was a fun little piece of shit Richard Ramirez clip. So on August 6, 1985, Ramirez drove to Northridge and broke into the home of Chris and Virginia Peterson. Ramirez crept into the bedroom, startled Virginia, who was 27, and shot her in the face with a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun. He then shot Chris Peterson in the temple and attempted to flee, but Chris Peterson fought back and avoided being hit by 2 more shots during the struggle before Ramirez escaped. So 1 shot in the face, 1 shot in the temple, and fights back. The couple survives their injuries.
Both.
Dang. On August 8th, 1985, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Diamond Bar and chose the home of Sakina Abawath, a 27-year-old, and her husband, Elias Abawath, a 31-year-old. Sometime after 2:30 a.m., he entered the house and went into the master bedroom. He instantly killed the sleeping Elias with a shot to the head from a .25 caliber handgun, and he handcuffed and beat Sakina while forcing her to reveal the locations of her family's jewelry, and brutally raped and sodomized her. He repeatedly demanded that she swear to Satan that she would not scream during the assaults. When the couple's 3-year-old son entered the bedroom, Ramirez tied the child up and continued to rape Sakina. After Ramirez left the home, Sakina untied her son and sent him to the neighbors for help. Ramirez, who had been following the media coverage of his crimes, left the Los Angeles area and headed to the San Francisco Bay Area. What the fuck, man? Like, oh, there's my 3-year-old. Like, oh, well, I guess I gotta fucking tie him up or whatever, and then I gotta get back to...
So, yeah, he's definitely not gay, right? Because he hasn't sodomized any of the male victims. He only rapes the...
Just wait. On August 18th, 1985, Richard Ramirez entered the home of Peter and Barbara Pan. That's right, Peter Pan. Peter was 66 and, short story, was killed in his sleep with a gunshot to his temple from a .25 caliber handgun. Barbara, who was age 62, was beaten and sexually violated before being shot in the head and left for dead. At the crime scene, Ramirez used lipstick to scrawl a pentagram and the phrase, "Jack the Knife," on the bedroom wall. When it was discovered that the ballistic and shoe print evidence from the Night Stalker crime scenes matched the Pan crime scene, then Mayor of San Francisco Dianne Feinstein divulged the information in a televised press conference. So the leak infuriated the detectives of the case, as they knew the killer would be following media coverage and have an opportunity to destroy the crucial evidence. Ramirez admitted that he had been indeed watching the press and dropped his size 11.5 Avia sneakers over the side of the Golden Gate Bridge that night. He remained in the area for a few more days while things cooled off before heading back to the Los Angeles area. So he rolls into San Francisco, one time commits a crime, and Feinstein's like, "Listen, we got it. Here's some information that nobody has." And the detectives are like, "Fuck.
Thanks a lot."
We've been holding on to that." So on August 24th, 1985, a now 25-year-old Richard Ramirez traveled 76 miles south of Los Angeles in a stolen orange Toyota to Mission Viejo. He loves stealing Toyotas. They must just be really easy to steal. That night, he arrived to the home of James Romero Jr., who had just returned from family vacation to Rosarito Beach in Mexico. Romero's son, 13-year-old James Romero III, happened to be awake and hear Ramirez's footsteps outside the house. That's me. Like, if someone tries to break in, I'm fucking up till 4 a.m, like every night. Like, hey, what are you doing? It's
Who's there?
We thwarted before it ever takes place.
Yeah.
So, this kid is on point and thinks there's a prowler outside, goes to wake up his parents, and Richard Ramirez flees the scene. James raced outside and was able to note the color, make, and style of the car, as well as partial license plate. So he done good.
Yeah.
Romero contacted the police with this information, believing that they had just chased away a possible thief. So,
What year was this?
this was 1985. Greg sent me over. Why didn't you chase him down the street in your undies? And that's exactly what he did, Greg. That's exactly what he did. The dad came out and said, "Fuck all that." Didn't catch him. No, you did. Okay. Oh, that's right. Greg said that that was actually me. And yes, I did. When somebody stole my car, I chased him down the street in my underwear. Turns out a car is faster than you in your underwear.
No
Just
way.
so you guys know.
But that's so aerodynamic.
So Ramirez has, it looks like probably his first close encounter of maybe possibly, getting caught. He had it. It was, he got caught in the middle of probably breaking into a house to murder these people. Like, thank God that kid was up for them. After this encounter, Ramirez broke into the house of Bill Carnes, who was 30 years old, and his fiancée Inez Erickson, who was 29, through an open back door. Ramirez entered the bedroom of the sleeping couple and awakened Carnes when he cocked his .25 caliber handgun. He shot Carnes 3 times in the head before turning his attention to Erickson. Ramirez told the terrified woman that he was the Night Stalker and forced her to swear she loved Satan as he beat her with his fists and bound her with neckties he found in the closet. After stealing what he could find, he dragged Erickson to another room and raped and sodomized her. He then demanded cash and more jewelry, making Erickson swear on Satan there was no more. Before leaving the home, Ramirez told Erickson, "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." So he is very proud of his new moniker, I do believe. Erickson unties herself and went to a neighbor's house to get help for her severely injured fiancé. Surgeons were able to remove 2 of the bullets from his head, and he survived his injuries. That's why you use a .25, right?
I mean,
Or
that's
20.
what I was going to say earlier. Like, with those small caliber handguns, I would not want to get shot in an attempted murder by one of those, let alone, any other time. But at least if you hit me with a larger caliber, I'm going to be dead and I'm not going to feel anything.
It's got a little staying power,
Yeah.
a little knockdown.
Like, I don't know.
I do know. He should have just get a 9. Just a 9,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's...
But maybe he relished in the fact that, hey, maybe this person might
I
live
think
through this. They might be a vegetable forever.
I think that's exactly what he does. So he does survive his injuries. Erickson was able to give a detailed description of the assailant to investigators, and police were able to obtain a cast of Ramirez's footprint from the Romero house. The stolen car was found on August 28th in Wilshire Center, Los Angeles, and police were able to obtain a single fingerprint from the rearview mirror despite Ramirez's careful efforts to wipe the car clean of his prints. It's said to be a very cold night, or a very hot night, and Richard most likely took off his gloves for a minute or two and reached up and adjusted the rearview mirror. So they found 1 fingerprint up at the very top. The stolen car, yep, we already did that. The print was positively identified as belonging to Richard Munoz Ramirez, who is described as a 25-year-old drifter from Texas with a long rap sheet that included many arrests for traffic and illegal drug violations. Law enforcement officials decided to release to the media a mugshot of Ramirez from a December 12, 1984 arrest for car theft, and the Night Stalker finally had a face. At police press conference, it was announced, quote, "We know who you are now, and soon everyone else will. There will be no place you can hide." Richard went to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother Robert. He saw the cops at the Tucson bus station and went back to L.A. and saying, fuck that. He's trying to avoid that at all costs. On August 30th, 1985, 6 days later, Ramirez took a bus to Tucson finally, visits his brother, unaware that he'd become the lead story in virtually every major newspaper and television news program across the state of California. He's a fucking drifter. He's not like reading newspapers and watching the news. After again failing to meet with his brother, he returned to Los Angeles early on the morning of August 31st. He walked past a few police officers who were staking out the bus terminal in hopes of catching the killer. Should he attempt to flee on another outbound bus to a convenience... They're staking it out, making sure he doesn't get away, and he walks right past them. He heads over to a convenience store in East L.A., after noticing a group of elderly Mexican women fearfully identifying him as El Matador, which means the killer. So he's in a small like liquor store, and there's this group of women are sitting at a table, and he's standing in line, and he like looks over, and they're looking at him, and they kind of do the quick snap, look away. Nothing over here, no sir. And he kind of looks back, and he could tell at his periph they're looking back, and he looks over and they snap back again, and then all of a sudden one of them just stands up and says, "El Matador." And he looks over. He said at this time, literally, he looks over at the newsstand and realizes that every newspaper on the stand has his face on the front page. So it has gotten fucking real for El Matador. Ramirez sees his face on all the newspapers, and after a full panic attack ensues, sprints out the front door. Just gone. People not cautious. They went ahead and tried to follow him. Ramirez attempts to get on a bus, and unknowing of what just happened in the grocery store or in the liquor store, the people on the bus pretty much start saying, "Holy shit, that's him. That's the Night Stalker." So literally he's being swarmed. So he runs and jumps a 9-foot sound barrier wall on the freeway, crosses the Santa Ana freeway, and attempts to carjack a woman, but was chased away by more bystanders who pursued him. So at this point, he's jumping through backyards, and people are calling 911 saying like, "Hey, there's someone running through my fucking backyard. I think there might be a prowler here." And you can see the 911 calls coming in. One house, one house, one house. Skip to one house, and you can see the trail of 911 calls come in as the mob comes down the street. As Richard passes through backyards, the mob's yelling like, "Call 911, that's the Night Stalker." So people are just running through. There are dozens of people just chasing him. So Richard's still running. After hopping over several fences and attempting 2 more carjackings, he was eventually subdued by a group of residents, one of whom had struck him over the head with a metal pipe during one of the attempted carjackings. The group held him down, relentlessly beating him until police arrived, at which point Richard Ramirez immediately identified himself as the Night Stalker to stop the brutal beating. Unfortunately, the police were indeed obligated to save him from the mob. Question.
Tell that to Rodney King.
Oh,
You had to do it. Question number 9, guys. How far did Richard make it on foot from the liquor store to where he was finally caught? Was it A, a quarter mile, B, 1/2 mile, C, 1 mile, or D, 2 miles from the liquor store? How far did Richie make it? Not my Richie. Casey's saying he went 2 miles. Robbie's saying he got a mile out. Casey's right. He made it 2 miles from essentially a pitchfork mob screaming "El Matador" behind him.
Satan was lifting him up on his wings.
Satan had him lifted up.
wings.
It wasn't Red Bull in the late 80s. It was Satan. So we're going to take one more short break right here. We'll add up the score when we get back, and we're going to come back with the rest of the Night Stalker's life. Lovely. So come back, guys. Hey everyone, just want to take a quick second to remind you about the most important way you can help out the show. 2 official ways. One is now the new merch store, which is serialchillerspodcast.threadless.com. Great spot. If you guys have any troubles with that, let me know. The other way is the Patreon page. That's patreon.com/serialchillerspodcast. On that, you can go there. You can give as little as $1 a month. You can help producer Greg and I continue to be able to focus on this show singularly and hopefully make this our full-time job one day. That's serialchillerspodcast.patreon.com. That's serialchillerspodcast.threadless.com. Thank you guys so much for your help. Thank you everybody who's already donated, and thank you to everyone who's thinking about donating. All right, so we're going to jump right back into Richard Ramirez. He's been captured, and probably can we agree to at least right now give him the preliminary award for best capture of any serial killer possible?
For sure, 100%.
Yeah.
Like it was a lynch mob. He got chased by a bunch of citizens, and it wasn't. That's the guy. They didn't just hold him down; they beat the shit out of him.
What year was this?
85.
So,
85.
I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in 85, and just the fact that people rallied together, you know what I mean, to chase this dude.
Right.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Well, jury selection for the case began on July 22nd, 1988. At his first court appearance, Ramirez raised a hand with a pentagram drawn on it and yelled, "Hail Satan." We've all seen the famous picture. It is like the one thing in Joe Dirt, remember? He's like, I was totally bombing on his sex side, and I did the criminal sketch. And he's like, my dad came out looking like Father Time. My mom came looking out like that Night Stalker guy, Richard Ramirez. And the picture is the hand up with the pentagram. Yeah. Great movie, great drawing. 10 out of 10 would watch again.
I'll be back in a few days.
On August 3rd, 1988, the Los Angeles Times reported that some jail employees overheard Ramirez planning to shoot the prosecutor with a gun, which Ramirez intended to have smuggled into the courtroom. Consequently, a metal detector was installed outside the courtroom, and intensive searches were conducted on everybody entering. Even people that weren't normally having searches conducted on them pretty heavily, anybody coming in and out were getting extensive searches coming in. On August 14th, the trial was interrupted because one of the jurors, Phyllis Singletary, did not arrive at the courtroom. Later that day, she was found shot dead in her apartment. The jury was fucking terrified. They could not help wondering if Ramirez had somehow directed this event from inside his prison cell and if he could reach other jury members. However, Ramirez was not responsible for Singletary's death. She had been shot and killed by her boyfriend, who later committed suicide with the same weapon in a hotel. The alternate juror who replaced Singletary was still too frightened of the event to return home during the trial. Damn. So, Richard Ramirez had people fucked up in the 80s. And even though we're 4 years later, I mean, we're talking his trial, and it's 4 years from when he's arrested, we're still heavy into satanic panic.
Yeah,
this
I was
is
gonna say, like,
I think West Memphis 3 may have been Greg, can you give me the date on the West Memphis 3 murder? But I think it was 87, 88. I think we're still going strong. Yeah. So September 20th, 1989, Richard Ramirez is going to be charged with crimes. Question number 10. How many total crimes? Damn, it was 1993, Greg says. So 93 was West Memphis 3. So it is, I mean, Richard Ramirez could have very well been a spearhead for a lot of it.
I mean, I remember growing up and it was
a thing.
Yeah, it was definitely a thing. And now it's not.
It's
not.
not.
You know,
it's
not
a troll
relevant
thing.
whatsoever.
It's a funny. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember in the early 90s when it was definitely.
Yep. So question number 10. He's going to be charged. How many total crimes is he going to be charged with in the end? Now, remember, he didn't just murder people. There are other crimes. So we're talking total crimes over the span of everything. People that have survived, attempted murders, rapes, burglaries. How many crimes is he going to be charged with? The closest to the answer is getting 500 points. Okay, Robbie said, was it 30? Yep, 30. Casey says 47. In the end, Richard Ramirez is convicted of all charges. 13 counts murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, 14 burglaries, equaling Casey's answer. Nearly 43 total crimes. Casey's going to get 500 points here and take...
I'm a little worried that you're so good with this one.
Suck it, Robbie.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so we've got 1750 to 750.
I'm channeling Satan right now. He's giving me the answers.
I will not swear to Satan.
He's just not gonna do it.
No.
Oh, you know what? I lied about that 1750 to 750. Casey actually also got the answer for the running. So it's 2000 to 750.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. 2000, 750. Let me look here, Robbie, and see if you still have a chance on the final two. They are worth... Okay, so the last one is a stab. Stab at it.
I'm gonna have
Just
to,
no
yeah.
matter what. It's going to be worth 1,000 points when you get there. So... he's charged with 43 crimes. We'll go over that again. It's 13 counts murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. Remember, we said he did 14 murders. He's attached to that one officially in 2009 later. During the penalty case of the trial on November 7th, 1989, he was sentenced to die in California's gas chamber. He stated to reporters after the death sentence...
Big deal. Death always went with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland.
Big deal. Death always went with the territory.
I'll
I'll see you in Disneyland. I'll give it one more time.
Big deal. Death always went with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland.
So that's your Richard Ramirez. That's the walk out of the courtroom. So that's when the first time that the press are seeing him come out, he's being transitioned to the van. Big deal.
Yeah.
Death always came with the territory.
Very nihilistic of him.
Yes. Very nihilistic. He's, doesn't he sound a little oafier than you imagined he would?
Yeah.
He looks so like he looks kind of scrawny in a lot of his pictures. He looks like he'd sound like this when he talked.
Yeah, he looks like somebody that believes they're a vampire.
But instead, he kind of sounds like Napoleon Dynamite a little more than really anything else.
Big deal.
So he stated, big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland. The trial costs $1.8 million, which at the time was the most expensive trial in the history of California. Question number 11. For 500 points, which trial would surpass it next? No multiple choice. 500 to the trial that would surpass the answer. Can Robbie get back into it? Both gentlemen answer the correct answer. The O.J. Simpson trial. For a split second, I thought Robbie was going to get back into it, and Casey pulls through with the O.J. answer.
Immediately, OJ.
Yeah.
So that is going to make it 2,000 to 7. Oh wait, wait, no.
How much was it worth? 500.
It's yep.
25 he's got.
Yeah, the 25. You've got 1250. You can't win with a stab. I'm sorry.
But I'm still gonna stab.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So this one officially goes to Casey. Before we move on too far, congratulations,
Ask
Casey.
me about my wiener.
Shake my hand.
So congrats, Casey. That's your official noise when you come on now. You've earned it.
Bambo clot.
So immediately into question number 12. Robbie, do you want to get a stab at it? Question number 12 and last question. Besides dying, one last major event will happen to Richard in prison. You can stab for 1,000, or I have multiple choice for 250. If you're gonna stab, write it down. So Casey, you gonna stab too while you're here since you already got the win?
Yep.
All right. Casey has got his answer in. Greg said learns to read. Robbie says raped. Casey says he gets married. By the time of the trial, Ramirez had fans who were writing him letters and paying him visits. Beginning in 1985, Doreen Loy wrote him nearly 75 letters during his incarceration. In 1988, he proposed to her, and on October 3rd, 1996, they were married in California's San Quentin State Prison. Okay, so so many people don't find love. This guy is convicted of 13 murders and rapes and burglaries and just so much shit. And he gets married. So, yeah.
There's someone out there for everyone.
There's someone out there for everyone. For many years before Ramirez's death, Loy stated that she would commit suicide when he was finally executed. However, Loy and Ramirez eventually separated, and on August 7th, 2006, his first round of state appeals ended unsuccessfully when the California Supreme Court upheld his convictions and death sentence. On September 7th, 2006, the California Supreme Court denied his request for a rehearing. Ramirez had appeals pending until the time of his death, but don't they all? Ramirez died of complications secondary to B-cell lymphoma at Marin General Hospital in Green Bay, California on June 7th, 2013. He had also been affected by chronic substance abuse and chronic hepatitis C viral infection. At 53 years old, he had been on death row for more than 23 years. And they said that he would likely have been sitting on death row about another 20 more had he have lived.
Dang.
So...
Congratulations.
The average
Your
is
tax-paying dollars went to keeping this man alive.
And check out our new politics show coming out next. No, I'm just kidding. So thank you guys for hanging out with me late night. Get you a little break from home. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, producer Greg, for coming on again. Greg, as always, is there anything you'd like to add? Just the horns. Greg throws them up so we can all know to be metal.
And hail
Satan.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Serial Chillers podcast. All right, that was episode 26. Thank you guys so much for listening. The Richard Ramirez story pretty much speaks for itself in its brutality and unpredictability. It was probably a very, very tough 5 months to be living in the state of California. Congrats to Casey on his second win in 3 tries. Nice going, man. Robbie, you'll have more chances in the future. You did a very good job today. Way to hold it down, and I believe in you. I think you'll come back and get one. If there's any cool stories or anything that I missed about Richard, please reach out to me. You can do it in so many ways. Facebook, it's Serial Chillers Podcast. The Instagram is at Serial Chillers Podcast. Twitter is at Chillers Podcast. The email address, serialchillerspodcast@gmail.com. You can call or text the phone line 1-805-666-2513. Also, serialchillerspodcast.threadless.com is the new merch store, so please check that out. And as always, patreon.com/serialchillerspodcast, where you can donate to the show to help us keep it going. You can also find me on Untappd if you want to kind of check out the beers I'm drinking while we're doing the show, and maybe while we're not doing the show. Today we had an Evil Twin IPA with a crazy long name that I cannot remember, and I threw the can away already. I had Critical Band by Modern Times, and we finally finished the last crowler of Tioga Sequoia's Pickle Rick, so it is gone. There is no more Pickle Rick. Casey also brought me a very large bottle of Golden Drock, which we did not get to, which I will get to later. Research for today's episode came from the Radford University's timeline. This one was put together by Melissa Dietrich, Nada Gorbett, Terry Patterson, and Helen Pegler. Thank you guys so much. I also used Murderpedia, several articles, including Crime Library's long, extensive, full look at Richard Ramirez. I also used excerpts from the book Night Stalker by Philip Carlo, classic Wikipedia, and watched the documentary Born to Kill, along with multiple interviews with Richard himself. All music from this episode is by me or producer Greg. Thank you guys all so much for joining us for episode 26 of the Serial Chillers podcast, and as always, remember, don't talk to strangers.